I am Mark Anthony Neal, James B. Duke Professor of African and African American Studies and Chair of the Department of African and African American Studies. My job here today is to introduce Alexis Pauline Gumbs. I will start by issuing my own congratulations to Meridians on their 20th anniversary. It is a journal that I am not unfamiliar with. The groundbreaking issue on hip hop and feminism that was published in 2007 by my former colleague Janelle Hobson. The issue also by Janelle on Harriet Tubman, in which we had the opportunity to interview two of the scholars who wrote one of the more provocative pieces in that journal, Treva Lindsay, my former PhD student, and Jessica Marie Johnson, my future collaborator. We had the great opportunity of interviewing them on Left to Black to celebrate that particular issue of Meridians. But today, of course, we're here for Alexis Pauline Gumbs. I was sitting at the inn at Penn 2 nights ago in Philadelphia, having a conversation about the state of the field with Margot Natalie Crawford. And we began to talk about the trilogy movement in Black studies. We all, of course, know about the Fred Moten trilogy. We know about the Imani Perry trilogy, which is actually extended to a 4th book that was published in an 18-month period. I'm not sure we talk as much about the Alexis Pauline Gumbs trilogy. And it was Margot who said in this conversation that one of the things that Alexis brought to the table, besides an engagement with the work, she was both talking back to and talking with the work, was the element of love. And it's not necessarily something that we always hear about in the work. To be able to love on the scholars who came before us, to love on the work that they produced, even as we offer a critique. Now, this conversation that I had with Margot 2 nights ago is not unlike conversations I've been having with folks for 15 years, ever since I came to Duke. And virtually in every interaction, when I tell someone, well, I teach at Duke, the first thing they say is that, oh, so you must know Alexis Pauline Gumbs. Now, it's one thing when I was having these conversations when Alexis Pauline Gumbs was just still a graduate student here at Duke. It is not so surprising these days, as she has become established as one of the most important voices, I would argue, that have emerged in the last decade in fields that we would describe as Black studies and obviously Black feminist thought. The creative license that she's taken with theory has created new spaces to think about the work the same way we think about the impact that books like In the Wake have had. We also must talk about the work and the impact that Alexis Pauline Gumbs has had. The trilogy, of course, Spill, Scenes of a Black Feminist Fugitivity, in which she is in conversation with the great Hortense Spillers. M Archive, After the End of the World, in which she's in conversation with M. Jack Alexander. And of course, the new book, Dub, playing on Sylvia Winter's last name, Dub, with the W, but also to think about the tradition of Jamaican dub poetry. A book called Finding Ceremony, which was just published, of which another former colleague of mine, the always fun and exciting Lisa B. Thompson, writes, offering a sweeping, thoughtful, and exquisite meditation on Sylvia Winter's work, Alexis Pauline Gumbs' poetic engagement represents a new and unique way of encountering and paying homage to Black feminist theory and Black feminist theorists. A beautiful and graceful text, Dub will inspire readers to return to and rethink Winter's work and place her within African diaspora studies, Caribbean studies, and Black feminist studies. I introduce to you now Alexis Pauline Gumbs.
Thank you so much. I have to say the same thing has been happening to me also these same past 15 years. So you must know Mark Anthony Neal. And thankfully, yes. I am so excited to be here and really grateful to be just a part of this. I feel like there's those of us who are physically gathered here, and I'm so excited about that. And I also feel that there's the multitude that has been embraced and nurtured and activated by Meridians, and I feel very, very honored to honor all of that. And I wrote what I was going to say because I know we have time. And I've changed my title in the past 24 hours. So this is now called A We That Requires No Other, a socio-poetic ceremony. And I have to say, I'm grateful to so many people who are in this room who have been inspirations to me, especially you, Dr. Giddings. And I'm also offering these words with gratitude to Juanima Lubiano, who is also a person who was a co-chair of my dissertation committee. It wasn't until I was in the middle of this project with Sylvia Winter's work that I realized that Sylvia Winter had been on Juanima Lubiano's dissertation committee. So I feel like I'm trying to be a good grandchild is what I'm trying to say. And I appreciate learning about the generosity that Sylvia Winter had with Juanima, because the generosity that she has offered to me also has been everything. So I love you, Juanima. In 1975, the great Sylvia Winter, her colleague Edward Glissant, were among those invited to go to Wisconsin, of all places, for a gathering about ethnopoetics, the intersection of the study of anthropology and poetry. What does the poetic linguistic practice of a group of people tell us about their culture? At that gathering, Glissant gave a talk that became his famous essay, Free or Forced Poetics, the core of his concept of a poetics of relation, where he first provided an analysis of Martinique and Creole as an example of the fact that the language of colonialism, can only reproduce the conditions of colonialism, and that the Creole hybrid languages created by colonized people don't make worlds, but continually break worlds apart. For her part, Sylvia Winter's answer to the question that was posed to all of the participants, what is ethnopoetics, said basically, there is no such thing. And if there is, there should not be. Ethnos, she explained, this root word that is supposed to mean the people, the culture, in the way the hopeful white poet anthropologist deployed it, does not mean the people or the culture. It means the other. And in fact, it is a particular moment in the history of European thought where the concept of the people, or more to her terminology, man, cannot be imagined without an other. This logic, she explained, is at the core of the genocidal, settler colonial, extractive, enslaving logic that the white people who define themselves as man imposed on the planet. They define themselves as man and everything else as nature to be dominated. They included in that nature everyone who was in a relationship with nature that they wanted to dominate. They made that separation from nature core to their definition of the human, and then created a narrative of science to explain that that separation was only natural. For Sylvia Winter, there might be something ironic about that formulation, but poetic, no. Sylvia Winter says what we need is a sociopoetics, poetics for the society we need, poetics of a possible relation. The situation we have, she explains, is one of separation. The dominant story and the languages in which we reproduce it say that we are not related. Our relationships to people and environment are mediated by capital and violence. We don't have a relationship to environment and people. We have a relationship to a means of production or to deadly force, and that is what connects us in this sick story. That is what tells us who and where we are. Sylvia Winter says in that essay in one way, elsewhere in other ways, that we need a poetic practice that finds a way, after all of this, to center our relationships, to displace the unnatural violence that the whole definition of what it is to be human in racist, heteropatriarchal, colonial capitalism insists is the only way to be, dominated or dominant. with resources or without, holding the weapon or being held hostage by it. Something else is possible, she says. Can we describe it? That attempt should be our work, the point of all our art, the great creative act. Her speech, published in the journal Al Chiringa, which, by the way, is available now for free online, was my first introduction to Winter. The scholar Brent Hayes Edwards mailed it to me through the postal service in an actual envelope before it was available online. Just, asterisk, don't wait for the stuff to be available online to read it because you might be too late. And there has not been a day since where I have not mentioned Sylvia Winter and that possibility, sometimes to people who are like, stop talking about this. But now I have this book where on every page I cite a moment of Sylvia Winter making a version of this argument in different contexts and in different ways. She is still making that argument right now, insisting that in this moment, when we can actually communicate as a species, all of us, in real time, we are better poised than ever to reject the false universalism that was used to justify colonialism and slavery and that continues to destroy our life chances on this planet, and to replace it with a true universalism, she would say. The simple fact that we are related. I too believe in that possibility. I'm dedicated to it in every moment, even now. And this for me is also the question of meridians, connecting points, through lines, boundaries, transnationalism, feminism, race, the work of finding and redefining our relation across all of this, the nuanced poetic activity of reclaiming relation as praxis. And that is why I'm so honored to be here, why I'm so honored to be some small part in the epic project that is Meridians, now entering its third decade of practice. Sylvia Winter says that after humanism, the ceremony must be found to create what she calls a we that needs no other. And so I'm offering, as something of an alternate opening ceremony for this gathering, an oracle that draws on the writing that has come for me directly out of what I see as the sacred demand that Sylvia Winter makes for socio-poetic practice. And it requires our relationship and your participation. Are you ready to participate? Yes. Extroverts said yes. I don't have to just listen to someone talking the whole time. Introverts said, what? I was planning on just listening to somebody talk the whole time. So I am myself an introvert who has spent a long time impersonating an extrovert. So I love all of you, and there's always multiple ways to participate. But the first thing that this oracle requires is your relation. So I want you to activate a resonant relationship in your own life. Maybe part of the reason that you're here, but not a person who's actually here in the room, because that's what's poetic about it. The borders of this university, the limits of capitalist access, even the boundary between life and death cannot eradicate your relations. So we're gonna dedicate this space to and for and with our relations. For example, my dedication is to Wanima. And I explained why. If Wanima had been physically here in the room, I would dedicate it to my brother Jared, because he was born on a Wednesday, and also he clarifies for me the stakes of my feminism, transnationalism, and race relationships in ways that actually challenge me and teach me a lot. So there are many people it could be, but just trust yourself for a moment and choose the person who you're going to dedicate to. They can be living now, they can have lived before, they can be older than you, younger than you. Find them. Did you find them? Okay. So if you would, turn to someone in here, let them know who you dedicated to, a little bit about why. If you cannot, write down the name and a little bit about why of who you dedicated to. We're just gonna take about 4 minutes to do that right now. Let me give you So I wanna say, I know we are here in the beautiful Franklin Humanities Institute, and you may have noticed that sometimes in academic settings, there is a moratorium on real questions. So we're not talking about the masquerade of insightful statements pretending to be questions. And also, we just want to push away the fear of asking questions we don't already know the answer to. This is not that. Not to say that that doesn't do anything, just this is not that. So draw on your relation for the power to be poetic in this moment, and think of a question that is at stake for you in this time in your life. It may have to do with why you prioritize being at this symposium. It may be related to the person that you dedicated to, or something else that is urgently on your heart. My question, my dedication being to Wanima, could be, what is the best way for me to be accountable to my mentors who are in academic spaces while I've decided to seriously limit the role academic spaces play in my own life? That's a real question I have that I do not know the answer to, but is urgent on my heart. So that's one example. Okay. Or if it was for my brother, it would be this. I don't maybe want to share all his business on video, but it might be how to bring together what I think about the idea of a reproductive narrative as the Black queer feminist that I am, and why I try to intervene in his dating life in ways that don't have much to do with his joy, but actually my idea of a reproductive narrative, So how to actually work with that. And this is not something you're gonna have to turn to your neighbor and share. People who want to share will have an opportunity to share as part of the oracle, but I just wanna challenge you to ask a real question. Sometimes I say a Lordian question, like the question that would make your voice shake, the actual breakthrough question for you now. Yes. Okay, so find it. It could also just be this area of inquiry that you have. It doesn't have to be grammatically a question. And when you have your question, think of a number between 1 and 49. It could be just a number that comes to you. It could be a number related to your question. My brother's 29 years old. That's a number. I met Wanima in 2004. 4 is a number. Yes. Between 1 and 49. And find that. Okay. So the way this sociopoetic oracle works is that there are 49 different passages in Dub that specifically refer to moments of emphasis in Sylvia Winter's essay, Ethno or Sociopoetics, that I referred to. And those are the 49. So you can share your question, again, as vaguely or as specifically as you want, out loud with the whole room. So this is for somebody who wants to do that. Of course, if you don't want to do that, you can just go read my whole book to yourself in a very quiet place. But if you would like me to read that passage to you out loud and potentially share a little bit of context, I can do that. So, yeah, who wants to go first? your question as vaguely or specifically as you want, and the number that you thought of. You raising your hand, you cleaning your glasses. A dear friend of mine I can make fun of. I won't make fun of you, though. Okay, I'll go first. So I am choosing number 4 for when I met Wanima. And the emphasis is on context. There was a time when we thought no one would ever understand. Even that, as we say it, presupposes time as you understand it. And that's not what we mean. What we mean is, how could you? How could you understand imperatives outside of time? How could you live this daily way if you did? How could the waves we sent become words you could hold? Or could they? If they would be flutters in your heart, would you yet know them? Pulses in your thighs, would you still know what to do? And then you started dancing. All of you, any of you. And that's when we knew to keep sending the messages. That's when we knew that you knew. I feel like that was related to all of that. And thank you for trusting your intuition. So for me, thinking about accountability, there's this way that I sometimes wonder, if what I do as an independent scholar and creative person and ceremonial being on the planet reaches back and affirms those people who have nurtured me in the spaces that I don't interact with as much. And to me, this is saying that it is actually in the dance of that they get the confirmation that they did what they intended to do, that reproducing the institution was not the whole thing they wanted to do, right? They wanted to make other possibilities, and I feel very grateful and affirmed by that. So this is how the oracle works. What other context can I give about this? This particular part is, so context is like one of the words that Sylvia Winter uses the most. There's like such an importance to context. And one of the reasons for that has to do with rejecting this false universalism that she's talking about, right? Because she's saying, for as many groups of people as there have been on the planet, there have been ways of relating to each other and relating to their environment that they created and generated and that are poetic in their own way. And the imposition of one particular narrative about what it means to relate to people and environment, and then the idea that everybody else should aspire to replicate that is what she says is responsible for climate crisis. She says it's the biggest danger to us and to all life on the planet. And so I also think about it in that way, that context of those particular relationships, the context of exactly what my work is and its specificity, the context of what it is that actually is the context within that deserves your hope. That specificity is also part of the message, I would say. So now you have had an example. It's not that scary. It's not like lightning strikes. It's just a different way of engaging a text. We're going to be okay. Does anybody else want to share their question and the number that they chose? 42. Frontier. And it's on page 121 for those of you who are reading along. I'm just kidding. Go to the edge. When you get there, dig your heels in. Step back, kneel down, lean your lungs over the ledge and scream. Stomach into the void and retch. Hands holding rocks, throw them. Empty out. Breathe. Stay there. Your head as low down as possible until all you can hear is the sound of your breathing, ragged and loud. This is how you know that the edge of the world is not the end. Do you know it? When you know it, turn around. That's 42. Thank you. And thank you for the beauty of that question and all that you shared. Who's next? Yes.
Thank you. Something that resonated was thinking about relationships that we hold that are fraught or contentious or marked by trauma. And my question coming from that is how to remain in intimate connection with and value the relationship with whatever that figure is for you. Even when there's palpable tension.
And what number did you think of?
17.
17. Anybody else thought of 17? Do you want to share anything about your question? Okay. Created. It's on page 59. Tamarind and prickly pear created they us. Pigeon peas and rice brought in and replanted. Sea grape and hibiscus reminded us thus of color and sweetness and salt into staying. Standpipe and trench maintained by whom sometimes, and Bur grass and crab remained. And Bur grass, especially, came back after everything and traveled also everywhere and made itself known. Bur grass unforgettably clung and climbed sideways beyond wherever it first was grown. Bur grass and mosquitoes, the quiet protectors, collectors of offerings of small blood and skin. May we be like the Bur grass, unforgiving future. May we be like the Bur grass, disdained but not ignored. May we be like the Bur grass, the early and lasting. May we be like the Bur grass, in proliferation, in pluck, from starburst and stuck. May we be like the Bur grass for the sake of our kin. I realized maybe 2 days ago, not everybody knows what Bur grass is. Oh, but I published it in a book. I didn't include a glossary. So Bur grass, for folks who may not know, is the name, is what we call it in Anguilla, of a grass, and it has these like stickers on it, like these really painful stickers if you were to step on them. And this is part of how they proliferate because they cling to whatever, the fur of the animal or you and your and your flesh itself or your sweater or whatever it is. And you can like not get them out. It is really, their tenacity is what I think of when I think of tenacity. Like it is the exemplar. Ideal tenacity. And I think about that in relationship to what you were sharing. Like, what does it mean to hold on? And what does it mean, those aspects of our lives that stay with us and are also painful and have lessons that will not be ignored? That's what I think of, in relationship to that. And that's in a whole section called Anguilla. And it wasn't until I was creating this oracle and looking at, because, I put this in a certain type of order for the book, and it's not organized by which essay is referred to, but almost all of the parts about Anguilla in that chapter, Anguilla, come from the essay Ethno or Sociopoetics, which was interesting for me to then realize. Yes, to realize yesterday. Yes. Somebody else want to share their question? Yeah.
How do we love people for whom we don't have a role in our lives? And my number is 47.
47. How do we love people for whom we don't have a role in our lives? Did anybody else choose 47? Okay. Revolution. This is on page 229. It turns. That's what we know. And supposedly it is too slow for anyone to feel it. That's an underestimation made by men who ignore the impact of cycles on their own dull, dizzying days. Work around, work around, work around. If only the ground was something to hold on to, I wouldn't hold your heartbeat in my head. If only this constant dragging didn't mean that we would all end up dead. That's 47. And it's in a section that's called Cycle, that is about what happens when we turn, and what happens when we turn our relationships. Sylvia Winter has this imagining of like when the stars became Earth and the Earth became stars. It's about the poetics of perspective in a very radical way, I would say, that she's thinking about. So I'll just say that also as context, because I think that question about a role in our lives speaks to perspective for sure. Thank you for asking. Okay. Yes. Wait, this type of question? No. Okay, so wait. So 2 more, and then the other type of question. Yes.
My question is it a choice? Sorry, 1 second, just the microphone so everyone can hear you. Okay. So my question is it a choice or a necessity to live on the margins? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about the woman writer I worked on. I would like to ask her this question. And the number is 49.
Mm-hmm. Is that the same number? Oh my goodness, you all knew each other already? You got to keep in touch. Now you have to keep in touch because you are psychically connected, evidently. Okay. Is it so land is the word that Sylvia Winter emphasized. And I'll say that in this essay, Ethno or Sociopoetics, in all the different essays, because Sylvia Winter's different essays are published different places by different people, emphasis looks really different. So there's 2 forms of emphasis in this particular essay, and there's italics, which land is italicized here. There's also a lot of all capital letters. And if nobody chooses one, I might read some of them to you just so you hear them. Okay. Page 240. Is it a choice to live on the margins? When wind and water love you, you can do anything. You can let yourself be buried. You can fly. When wind and water rush to meet you anywhere you can go anywhere, or you can stay. When wind and water clamor for your face with rushing secrets, you can forget, or remember, or know. When wind and water teach you, touch you, crash into your skin, you are preserved, or you can grow. If wind and water love you like you say they really love you, you don't need a life jacket or wings. If wind and water taught you what you think they really taught you, you can let go of your places and your things. If wind and water got you, that means wind and water got you. There is no little bit about their lashing love. If wind and water want you, you are here for wind and water. It don't matter if you ever call it love. I don't think there's anything more to say on that one. Okay, last one, no pressure.
My dedication is to my children who are in their early 20s. And the question is, how will you steward planet Earth? Because we have failed miserably. And my number was 40.
40, okay. Anybody else choose 40? Yes. Oh. Oh, I asked if anybody else chose number 40. Did you want to share yours also? I will never say no to you. So I'm going to read 40 and then Miriam will share because. So the emphasis was on otherness. And this is page 115. Okay. She was on the coastline with her goats. Walking the goats? Goats do not need supervision to wander around eating everything. She was there for a different reason. Her dreams. Her dreams told her everything, like not to listen to the cheap advice of the fearful, like not to threaten her pulsing brain with hair pulling, so they called her a mad woman and wild. Therefore, though she freely told her dreams to the people for nothing, they paid her no mind. Maybe if she had asked them to pay, they would have thought about it differently. But her dreams told her it wasn't money she needed, but time. Just so she had told William Gumbs her dream. This is my great-great-great-grandfather. She had seen it very clearly. The rocks would tear up the boat, and the sharks would eat up their bodies, and with his wedding coming up, he should probably just stay home. No, she didn't need dreams to tell her the common sense of her own people. He had already got the suit and that pretty Catherine Fleming, and he went out fishing for a last adventure and supposedly to bring back more fish for the party, more fish to sell for money for drinks for the party, whatever. In the dreams, weddings meant death, but she knew he wouldn't listen. So she was there at that particular piece of coast when he dragged himself in, ragged, naked, and bleeding, panting, pantless about how his friends had died. And she took off her petticoat and let him wear it. Later, he would say, the voice of God had given him the strength to swim all the way home, chased by friend-eating sharks. Later, he would say it was the love of Catherine that wouldn't let him drown, or fear, others said, that she would quickly choose another. Later, he would even admit that the mad woman herself had warned him with her dream, and he should have listened. Some of his great-great-grandchildren would hear about that. She was quiet, since she had already said what she knew. Simple petticoat over his generations. And the great-great-grands, with their own wild hair, yes, she had already seen them in dreams. Okay, Miriam.
I didn't have a question, just a thought or feeling, which is coexisting with the dead. And so what you've read also speaks to that, and it was related to number 47. My number was number 8.
Wonderful. Number 8. Okay. Context again. Like the word context, emphasis on context. And this is page 49. A volcano, a mountain in the ocean, hot, connected to the core, emerges and burns into islands, feeds coral. That's where they took us, where breathing underwater meets the fire within. And once there, rocks, bones, shells, everything broke until it could seem soft and sharp at the same time, until it could get in through pores and poverty and screens and wood, until it could get into the food, the air, the traveled history. And in the valley, and on the shoreline, nothing, not much, nothing but a patch you clear of burrs and pricks to get baptized, and all the buildings in the middle where the dry dust called for rain. And in the valley, the money and the sun-scorched myth of safety and the light-skinned people of 10 names taking each other again and again. And on the skin, the salt of centuries. And in the spit, the salt of centuries. And in the blood, the salt of centuries, the tears. We require a story not measured in years. Begin. Okay, so it's really almost time to stop, except I did start a little bit late. So maybe I can just reclaim 7 minutes because you have a question and then I just have. Oh yeah, 49.
Why 49? Yeah.
Because I cite it 49 times. So this is it in here. That's why. I just counted. Sometimes it's just like that. And I will say though, I love that question too because it allows me to talk a little bit about if we're going to be connected and if we're finding like what are the ceremonies for our connection. I'm excited for us to be able to use our intuition, but there's also the arbitrariness of 49, you know, and maybe it's not simply arbitrary how many specific times I cited this particular essay, but in a way it is arbitrary because I didn't know I cited it 49 times till I counted to make this, right? And so as we are experimenting with other ways to relate to each other and remembering that the way that we're repetitively relating to each other is as arbitrary and constructed as 49, choose a number between 49, 1 and 49, those aren't the real limits of our choices, right? And inside of that, we still are drawing on something that can't be quantified, your relationship to the person who you brought in here, right? Can't be quantified, the breakthrough that you're having right now. So putting those things together is part of what I like to do in relation with you. Okay. So now, there's not time for like the other type of questions right now, is there? Because I think it's 3:01. Okay. Well, does anybody have other type of question like this type of question? Like, what are you doing? Why? You know, that type of question that's not about your breakthrough, but just about something you're curious about that I could speak to helpfully. Yeah.
Sorry. Can you talk a little bit more about the way you see your work living and existing beyond the written word? So you did an oracle today, you perform poetry, the ways in which your work exists beyond the page and how other scholars might be able to take a more poetic and expressive and experimental approach to our work too.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Thank you. So, I think it's all ceremony, right? And the name of the subtitle of the book is Finding Ceremony. But I think that different ceremonies are archived in different ways, right? So this book is the archive of a ceremony, of my daily practice of going to Sylvia Winter and looking at the emphasis and seeing where it took me and crying and falling apart and relearning and unlearning my family, you know, all of those things. And this is not that, right? This is not that daily practice. This is an artifact from it, which doesn't include everything I even wrote in that practice, let alone everything else that happened in that long time of every day. And so everything else is that too, you know, like what we do. And I find myself always asking the question, what is the ceremony that I need, or what is the ceremony that we need? Occurs to me. I wonder why it is occurring to me right now, but I felt that I needed to go to the Combahee River and get a jar of water from the Combahee River before I turned 30. Like that was something that I felt I needed to do. And so I did, and we like pawned our jewelry and put gas in the car. Like it was not really the best time within our own economic life to do that, but we did that. And turned out like Venus was crossing the sun, which we hadn't known about. It was 150 years, like to the day, when Harriet Tubman went to the Combahee River to start organizing the most successful uprising in this this formation of at that moment never more enslaved Africans. And I knew that happened, but I didn't understand that we were going exactly 150 years to the day after that. And we went there, and there's all sorts of things. My grandmother designed the revolutionary flag of Anguilla, and it's 3 dolphins swimming in a circle. And we stood there when we finally found the Combahee River, which we literally followed a rainbow to get there. You can't make this stuff up. It's so strange. But 3 dolphins swam under what is now the Harriet Tubman Bridge, and they swam in a circle, and they swam back out to the ocean. And I was standing there wearing my grandmother's necklace, like, if my partner Shango Dari was there, if you had not been there, I would have been like, none of this happened. Like, this is just some extended hallucination. But it did happen, and what it told us, and you were the one who said it, Shango Dari, was like, okay, now we know that next year, because it took a year to organize that ceremony, right, of freedom and of leaving the plantations and of flooding the rice fields and of burning 32 plantation buildings down, we need to come back here. And we came back as 21 Black feminists to that same spot. And that is, we used the words that Harriet Tubman said when she had transcribed a letter about that experience and that ceremony, and how there was this storm that happened at the same time. And we stood there and we chanted, and it was a bright sunny day, and then all of a sudden it rained on us, and we were like, oh my goodness. Like all of the things that are beyond what we can figure out even with our minds, let alone write down or capture in words, are just part of that responsiveness to what I see as an ongoing question of what is actually the ceremony that's needed for the relation that I want to have, that does not exist within the rituals that currently structure my life or our lives or what we do, even though it still has to happen within whatever space I can move in that is still shaped and structured and limited by all of that. So yeah, I would say that that is important, and that I want to say that guides me, which means that even with these books, that it wasn't like I must create a book and I'm going to do this in order to create. I didn't actually know these would ever be books, and I even when I was like, oh, maybe there's a book, I didn't think that they were going to be published by Duke University Press at all, but they were. And I think that was part of the ceremony too, for what Mark is saying about, like, maybe that's part of that particular thing happening as part of other people trusting themselves and seeing that there's something else that they might want to do that they wouldn't expect to be functional in a particular way, but it is what they're being called to do, right? So yeah, the forms are infinite. And it's also, and this is part of what Sylvia Winter is talking about, it's also our responsibility to generate those forms that are needed and not to conform to what exists, because she outlines how deadly that has been and is. Okay, speaking of deadly, this is time to go. And I just wanted to read this from MArchive. I felt moved to read this because thinking about how we relate to each other and thinking about ceremony also in the context of virus and the viral, and there was something that made me want to read this particular page of MArchive, which is all dedicated to M. Jackie Alexander, as Mark said. They looked each other in the eyes every time and did not leave each other without singing a prayer, the name, or the wish. They learned to add touching hands into the ritual, a tradition newly sacred after the memory of the epidemic. And of course, none of that would have been possible if they didn't remember to look themselves in the eye every morning, or to chant the name of the prayer, or to track their dreams for keeping and sharing. There is a sacredness to every day, every time. It means again and again. It means all of us. It means this moment, this time, you and me, we're here, which was something they would never again take for granted. Thank you.